Hey guys, it's Sheena and Terrence here with another episode coming to you today to talk about mental health. In the U.S., May is considered the National Mental Health Month. And so with everything that we have going on right now in the midst of, COVID-19 still happening and the pandemic and just how that's weighing on people mentally, losing their jobs and so forth, or whatever it is that they may be dealing with, we wanted to shed some light on mental health as we prepare to go into a new month, but at least touch upon it. So we wanted to come to you to discuss it, but before we get into our viewpoints, our thoughts in regards to mental health, we wanted to first start off with the definition of it. So why don't you go ahead and give us the definition of mental health?
All right. So Mayo Clinic explains mental health as, also called mental health disorders. Mental illness refers to a wide range of mental health conditions, disorders that affect your mood, thinking, and behavior. Examples of mental illness include depression, anxiety disorders, schizophrenia, eating disorders, and addictive behaviors.
A big range there.
Yeah, it's a wide range of stuff, I think, like that happens with, that is included in mental illness. What are your thoughts on it?
To me, I view mental health as like a silent killer. And the reason why I say a silent killer is because it's something that's not talked about. It's something that a lot of people do not discuss. There's a stigma, especially in the minority community in regards to it. But, people are internally, silently suffering from mental health. They're not talking about it. They're not speaking out about it. And it is actually physically killing people. People are committing suicide. But it's also mentally, killing people as well. You're dying almost, I feel like. People that are suffering from mental health, something inside of them is dying, or something inside of them is, feeling like it's hard to live. And they're battling all these different things. So I consider mental health to be like this silent killer that needs or should have more attention than what it has.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I agree. I think it's just a whole range of various things that impact us, like it said, in the behavior, our mood and whatnot. But it has so much, it's so far reaching that it could impact all aspects of your life, I feel like. So I think it's something that should be talked about. But I think you mentioned a great point, is just there's a stigma to it.
Yeah.
In many cultures and community. It's just in general something that, I think about it back in history, people used to do like kind of mental correction and, experiments on people that had schizophrenia instead of having good care and actually trying to understand it and help people. It was stigmatized and actually looked down upon. And so there's a history to it that is nasty, and that's unfortunate. And a lot of people died that could have, been helpful to talk about it and explain it and also share with a lot of people. And there could have been families that stemmed from those people living if they had the proper care and preventative measures and maintenance programs to help them through the process. So it's unfortunate.
It is. And I also think that with mental health, that a lot of people, because it's not something that's necessarily talked about, I feel like a lot of people may not even realize that they're suffering from mental health or a mental illness, and that they may not even think that the things that they're doing can actually be signs of someone that's suffering from mental illness, because you don't even know what to associate it with. You just think that because someone is depressed and they're in this funk, they're down, and they don't, want to have the sun coming in the room, or they don't want to go outside, that's what you associate with mental health. But it's so much more than that, and it can also be very subtle too. Sometimes when you just feel like you don't want to get out of bed, and you just feel so unmotivated to do things, or overeating, having, addictions and so forth with eating or drugs or whatever it may be, that those can be signs of you suffering from a mental illness, a mental condition that you may not even realize, or that you may not even want to, not necessarily pay attention to that, but you don't even want to actually, sort of bring to light, or that you want to even try to diagnose yourself with that, because you don't want to have that stigma, or you don't want to be categorized as someone that's suffering, or have a mental illness. But it's something that I think a lot of people actually go through, and that they may not even realize it, and then they're not also going out and seeking the help that they need for it. And so you just continue to go through it, and unfortunately, it can end up bad. But some people just feel like, well, you know what, I'm okay, I've turned out okay, or I've seen my family, my parents, or so-and-so go through similar things and they turned out okay, but not knowing that there are ways in which, and resources in which, you can get help, and you should, to sort of break that. And that's why I think it's really just a stigma too in our culture for things, such as that, not speaking up.
So it's really broad, mental illness. There's so many different pockets of it, and we're by no means are we experts in it. But I remember speaking to somebody, and it was more of a casual conversation, but I started thinking afterwards. The person said, this is, they smoked, but then they started trying out drinking, and then the drinking turned in from like a more social things to they started drinking a little bit more, and then they said something that stuck with me. They said, this is how I know that I have an addictive personality. I have an addictive personality or behavior. Because they jumped from one thing and then they started doing another thing a little bit more than what's the typical in a social kind of environment. And it stuck with me. At the time, I didn't really say much about it, but like as it kind of sunk in, I just said, there could be something deeper that's there. I think some of the times we just overlook certain habits that we might have, and or behaviors we might have, and just say, oh, this is just my personality.
Or I like it.
Or I just developed this habit over time or whatnot. But there could be something deeper that's there that people should recognize and stop and reflect and say, is this real? Is this really that I'm enjoying this drink? Even if it's at 5 a.m, like I'm truly enjoying it, or are we masking something, or we just don't know why we're drinking, or why we're eating this ice cream, or why we're smoking, and I think there's a lot there that sometimes we're just not aware of.
Exactly, right.
Internally, in order to do that.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, you have instances where, like you're saying, the overeating, the emotional eating, and so forth, the drinking, or whatever the case may be. And it's like, are those things being used to sort of help you cope? Are they coping mechanisms for you? And that is also with you not even realizing it, because you're just going and you're in the swing of things that you don't even realize that, oh my gosh, I just ate, a whole bag of chips to myself, by myself, for no reason at all.
Well, now when you say a bag,
I mean like a big bag, like a family bag, not
okay,
like the little bag.
I eat chips all day.
No, I'm not talking about the little 25, 35 cent, whatever bag. Individual bags. I'm talking about a bag that can be shared. It's a family party size bag.
Okay, all right.
And you don't want through that whole bag, or a bucket of ice cream or whatever. And that there can be different things that are happening that are triggering for you to then go ahead and find a coping mechanism. Even being anorexic and bulimia, those are different issues, underlying issues of you internally, how you feel about yourself and what image you're trying to portray and all that. I mean, it's like you hear about these things and you see these things, but then we just associated them with specific things, and not understanding and realizing that just because I may not be throwing up or just because I may not be eating a bag of chips does not mean that I'm not depressed. And depressed, it can range from, acute depression or, something really small to something really big. I mean, it's not one set thing. I think people have to understand that mental illness is not one set thing. It does not look a certain way, which is why I also say it's a silent killer, because some of the times you don't even realize that you are suffering. It doesn't have to look a certain way for you to be impacted or for you to be going through it. So definitely speaking through those things, trying to get to the why, trying to break it down and understand, or just notice when you're doing things that you typically wouldn't do, to realize that maybe there's something going on that you need to look into. But I guess my question is, why is it in our community, is it such a stigma? Why is it such an issue in our culture?
Before I get to that, there was one thing you just mentioned about how things might show up in terms of mental illness, or like say specifically you said depression. I think we have to be careful with just kind of assuming, to your point, that for us to have mental illness or disorder, it has to be severe.
Yes, right.
It can be like you said, there's a spectrum, I think,
exactly,
that we should recognize and appreciate, and just know, like, just because I have some anxiety attack, that doesn't mean that, or just I get scared often, doesn't mean that I have a mental illness. You might,
right?
And that gets to the point of, to your point, speaking about it, talking to professionals and or family members who is loving and patient and willing to listen and give you positive feedback about, or constructive feedback about what might be going on. Yeah. Because there could be that it's going to go unnoticed, or there could be a misdiagnosis, like self-diagnosis.
Yeah.
You might call it that it's not mental illness, or you might say it's mental illness when it might not be. So seeking help is important, and seeking
definitely professional. Like I know resources. You're saying family and talk to them, and that is a resource that you can go to maybe express yourself, but you may want to seek professional guidance and so forth in addition to that.
But to your question about, within our culture, the minority culture, people of color, I think, I don't know why. I mean, I feel like it's just something that I feel that we haven't openly just discussed.
Yeah.
And I think...
But we're suffering.
We are.
We're suffering.
I think people of color, or I can't just say people of color. I'm going to speak about Black people right now, because that's what I know, the Black experience. I feel like we have suffered through history so much, and there's a whole lot of generational trauma. Whether that means slavery, that means the household, dysfunctional family or family dynamics, poverty, violence, whatever it may be. I feel that there's a lot of those factors that have generationally just kind of got brushed under the rug. Yeah. In the sense of, like, we're not talking about it. This isn't the norm, I think. And I think that's a danger of any kind of illness or any kind of issue, is that we don't recognize it and treat it. Yeah. Or understand the root causes. So you can see a whole lot of violence throughout your life, or a whole lot of hurt throughout your life, and if you don't recognize that, we basically are saying many things to ourselves that we should be, really taking a look at. For example, disciplinary, you get beaten a lot, if you're growing up, or your parents were beaten a lot. They might beat their kids, and the kids might actually take a negative reaction to that, And that might impact them emotionally, psychologically. But the thought would be is, well, I had that happen to me and I turned out all right.
Right.
You know, deal with it.
Right.
Instead of saying, what can something be going on here that we need to kind of look into?
Yeah.
I think we just need to be careful about basically glossing over things and making it seem like it's all good, and it's not.
I think that there's a couple things going on in our culture, and now this is just my opinion, and we are all entitled to our own opinion in regards to this topic, and we definitely welcome, others. But I think there's a couple things that are going on. Just observation and just giving it thought with our culture is, for one, the silence that we have put on each other for years and generations. And what I mean by silence is, when something is happening, we don't talk about it. We don't talk about what's going on inside of our house, outside of our house. We don't bring outsiders in and so forth. That hush hush, that we've probably all experienced at some point, or know someone that has experienced, where we don't discuss what's going on with so-and-so, and we act as if it doesn't exist and that it's not there. And even, back in slavery and so forth, we have always had this thought process, or where they have made it seem like that minorities, Black people, are people that are strong in strength and have withstand so much that you can go through this. And so you have that on your back, thinking that you are supposed to be bigger than this and that this is not an issue for you. And so therefore, then you don't talk about it. And then we also have something else of judging and judgment, I think. And I think we're very critical of each other in our culture, to where, if you are going through something and that's not normal, we're going to judge you, and then we may make fun of you. And then we may not make you feel comfortable to where it's going to welcome you to even say anything. And so then that too then holds you back, because now you're going to be looked at as an outsider or a weirdo or whatever the case may be, adding to that issue, which now you can't speak out about it because you don't want to be outcast and you're within your own group, your own community. So I think some of that goes on too in our culture, which makes it that much more difficult for people to speak out.
Yeah, I think when we were talking about this topic, you mentioned something about suffering in silence.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to kind of know. Like, you shouldn't be suffering in silence. That's probably the worst thing that you can do if you're suffering from mental illness, is suffering in silence and thinking that you can handle it, and that you're scared of someone making fun of you.
Right.
If you need to seek help, seek help.
Yes, and you should seek help for your own benefit. Now, without going into further research, because that's something that we have to do, and whenever we talk about things, you can take our opinion, but definitely go back and research things as well, so that you can have your own understanding and formulate your own opinion about it. But mental illness can also be hereditary. We have a friend who unfortunately is suffering from mental illness and is maintaining it and so forth, and come to find out it was hereditary. Someone else in the family had also suffered from it as well. And that friend, we were talking to that person in regards to some pointers, asking about, some things that maybe we are missing, or things that we may, should bring up. And one thing that they had mentioned, and I'll let you explain it, where they gave the example of mental illness being the flu versus being what did they say? Having diabetes versus having the flu.
Right. Yeah. Just like in terms of the symptoms, and also the impact of it. Like, if you think of it as an illness or a sickness, it's the flu versus versus diabetes. And what I'm understanding from the person is that the flu or the cold is something that you have in a season. Yeah. And then it goes away. You're treated, or you get better. The diabetes it's a continuum, essentially. It's a continuum of harm or impact and or treatment that's necessary for it. Yeah. You gotta monitor, you gotta watch it, you gotta be careful of it, because it's there. It's gonna continue to be there. So it's a continuum of that struggle, I think. with mental illness, and that kind of helped paint a picture, I think, for both of us. Is just like, you don't just get depression and then, my understanding is that it's not typically you just get depression and you come out of it and you're fine.
Yeah.
You know, you can regress back into it depending on what kind of triggers or stressors that might affect the next episode of it.
Yeah.
Of the depression or anxiety or whatever it may be that someone's struggling with.
Yeah, I mean, definitely do self-checks. Check yourself. You know, you have to be in tune with yourself, and that goes back to self-care and understanding the importance of self-care and realizing when you need to take a step back and you need to check yourself. And once you have done that, I know that people may be, you know, skeptical of going into speaking with someone because they don't want to be put on pills or put on medication, and, you know, that may stop them because they don't want to get all drugged up and all this stuff. It's not necessary that is always going to be the remedy or the answer. And that's something that you can talk to that professional about in regards to what's the best plan of action, the best plan of care for you as an individual. And so resources, there are resources out there. And especially at a time like this, I know that, you know, we've had social distancing, and so maybe we can't go out, but there's a lot of different resources out there that you can, you know, look into. There's apps that you can download on your phone. There's virtual meetings that you can have. If you are working and employed and you have insurance, there's EAP, Employee Assistance Program, that you can speak to a counselor, you know, for 5 free sessions, whatever the plan gives you. And after that, you know, you're going to have to pay. There's hotlines and so forth. There are options for you out there. You have to find out which option is the best option for you. But we just recommend that you go out there and you at least take a look. And even if you feel that you can't go to someone and speak to someone, maybe starting a journal is a way for you to start. Just writing down your thoughts, writing down what's going on, because the best thing you can do is to get it out of your head and deal with it and assess it then. The worst thing you can do is to keep it in and then let it build up, and then it turns into a too late sort of situation where it becomes bad. And so, you know, try to just work with it, I guess, and figure it out and reach out to others if you can.
You know, we talked a little bit about the culture, and, you know, I'm optimistic. I think in the past it was tough. It's very difficult for folks that did have mental illnesses. But I think we're moving in the right direction. We still got a ways to go, but I think we're moving in the right direction. So that's why I remain optimistic about it, because, you know, we have folks in the limelight, celebrities that's actually starting to talk about the topic. You know, like I think Taraji Henson, she has a foundation now specifically geared towards mental illness and within the Black community. Charlamagne on The Breakfast Club, you know, he's a radio personality. He talks about that in his book, you know, and each time he has an opportunity with guests that's on the radio talk show, you know, he expresses the concern and what's going on with the community. So I think these are steps towards bringing more awareness and normalizing the conversation that's needed within this realm, because for far too long we've been too quiet about it and been, you know, it's been in the dark. So shining light on it, I think, is a great step towards preventing and or helping and or improving the situation as best we can.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we have to do it more. And I know with that, it's time. You need more time. But we have to do it more. We have to talk about it more, because people are suffering from it at an early age. And so you have to let it be known that it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay for you to be going through it, and then find ways in which you can help. I mean, because there's children who are having to deal with things that maybe we as children didn't have to deal with, you know. times are changing, things are different, and they are having different issues that they're dealing with, and then not feeling like they have someone to talk to and confide in as well, especially if you're not being receptive or open to that conversation, which makes it difficult for even children. So definitely being open about it, saying that it's okay, and doing it more, I think is something that's definitely needed, in our community and others.
There's also this this phrase I heard someone use in regards to mental illness, and they kind of talked about it in the sense of susceptibility, meaning, like COVID-19, for instance. Susceptibility meaning, okay, you have certain characteristics or traits or things that make you more prone to struggle with the virus more, or to actually contract the virus and have difficulty fighting it. So the person kind of explained, look, well, mental illness, also there's some characteristics that make people more susceptible to it. To your point about, it might be hereditary.
Okay.
Or you might have certain kind of emotional characteristics or thought processes that make you more susceptible, like you exaggerate something a bit more, so if someone says, oh, that's a dumb drawing that you made, and you made that drawing as a kid, or for instance, and that drawing meant a lot to you, you extrapolate that feedback and say, wow, that person's saying I don't know how to draw, then that turns into I'm a horrible artist, that turns into that person doesn't like me, maybe I have no value. So little things like that, maybe even within kids, that they're more prone to suffer from, as they get older, anxiety or depression or some kind of mental disorder. So that's what I mean by susceptibility, that careful of those signs too. If you do have children, or if you do have family members that have a certain kind of characteristics that might bring about,
warrant for you to be cautious and so forth. And that's a good point that you brought up. And what that made me think of is even some of the things that we may eat, some of the things that we're putting in our body, especially females who have to deal with birth control or hormone and so forth, that you can have a hormonal imbalance that could also trigger or make you become more prone to depression or things like this, all because of the chemicals that you're putting in your body. And you may not even realize what it's doing to you, or you may not even realize what's happening or why, but it could be the things that you're eating or just the chemicals that you're putting in your body that's causing a chemical imbalance, a hormonal imbalance, and then that's leading to other things, mental illness and so forth. Now, I'm not saying that, that's 100%, that there aren't any other factors, but that can also be a contributing factor to some of the things that you're going through. And so exercising, watching what we're eating, our diet and so forth, being mindful of the chemicals that we're putting in our body, those things, if we take a look at it, those things can actually be contributing. And if we are to fix it, then maybe we can also fix some of the issues that we are having. So it just made me think of other things, other variables that can trigger or that can lead to mental illness.
So what advice do we have, just to kind of, in a nutshell, what advice would you have to someone who you think might be struggling with mental illness and or knows someone that might be impacted by mental illness? What advice do you have to folks that might be listening?
I would just say, don't put it off. Don't put it under the rug. Don't turn a second eye to it or a blind eye to it. Recognize it. That's one of the steps in AA, right? Recognition. Don't be in denial. Recognize that there may be an issue. And then from there, assess it. And if you can't, definitely seek help and guidance professionally. And it's a start. At least start there. Recognizing it, owning it, and seeking some help. And then work on your self-care plan.
which can be the hardest thing, is that recognizing it and just
especially if you don't understand or know.
Yeah, or just seeking help. You know, you can be having an episode and the last thing you want to do is actually go out in public.
Yeah.
You know, so that must be very difficult. And, it's very hard to do, but you can do it. You know?
Take a step.
Even if that means not speaking to someone face to face, maybe texting them, reaching out to a friend, or again a professional that you think that would care about you and have your well-being in mind.
Yeah. You don't even have to leave your home nowadays.
Yeah. We're gonna leave some resources for those that want to learn more about mental health and mental illness. Right here. What do you call that?
In the comment section.
Is it in the comment section?
It is. And the description box and the comment section
that's
below.
What I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. You got me. You got that's what it was. You're so smart. And you know, additional remedies that I think I would recommend is also just giving different type of self-care options to yourself. You know, whether that means meditation, yoga, mindfulness is key, or just learning more about it. You know, just having some kind of interest in learning about it, so that way you can properly identify some signs and symptoms for yourself or others that you might care about.
Definitely.
There's one other thing I did want to say is that, you know, I challenge folks that where friends or family members may come to you to talk about mental illness or what they might be facing and the struggles that they have. Don't be an idiot. Don't be a douchebag. You know, if they're coming to you about something, like, don't be mean, don't be rude. You know, you have to have empathy. I mean, and if you're a true friend or a true family member that's looking out for the best interest of that family member or a friend, or someone you care about, a spouse, whomever it is, just try to empathize, try to understand where they're coming from. And you might not. It's okay if you don't. Tell them that you don't. But try to help them in some other fashion or point them in the right direction if possible. You know, mental health and mental illness is a complex issue, so don't feel bad if you don't understand it. Challenge yourself to learn more about it and help them as best you can.
Definitely, I agree with that. I mean, if someone is coming to you and they're confiding in you, I think it's a cry for help that they're coming to you, because I'm sure it took a lot of courage for them to get to that point to open up to you and discuss it. So definitely provide them with some form of support if you can. And I agree that you may not understand it, you may not agree with it or what they're saying, their logic, their reasoning. That's not for you. That's not what they're seeking. They're seeking support in some type of way, some type of guidance. And so if you can't do it, then I agree, lead them on to someone else who may be able to. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. I know it may have been a heavy topic, but we didn't want the month to go out with discussing it because it's such an important topic and very, very crucial for us to talk about and to bring awareness to. So if you have any opinions in regards to it, please feel free to drop them in the comments box. We are welcoming to keep the discussion open, and we want to thank you guys so much for staying tuned with us and unwinding these lines of mental health. Thank you. Until next time.